How's it going, PengPirates crew? It's your boy Adrian, and we're back with another video. So today is going to be a Doflamingo OP02 deck profile, which is pretty special to me because I've just been playing this deck ever since OP01, and I kind of wanted to revisit it because if you guys didn't know, we actually hit 1,000 subscribers last week, which is absolutely insane to me. I never thought that was like a milestone that I would be able to hit this fast, but you know, you guys are really supportive and you guys love the content, which is super awesome to me. And for any like OG fans out there, if you guys knew that Doflamingo is actually the first video that I made on this channel, and it's also our most popular, so it's a very special deck and also kind of special in terms of the YouTube channel, so I wanted to kind of save it for this 1K subscriber special. And then also, if you caught yesterday's video, I did mention at the end that we were going to have some sort of giveaway for 1,000 subscribers. Unfortunately, I don't have something like as grandiose as like a box of like OP1 or OP2 to give you guys, but I did still want to do like a small giveaway just to kind of give back to this community that has been just immensely supportive of our rise. But with that being said, the only two things you need to do to enter this giveaway is 1, be a subscriber to the account, and 2, just put in the comment section down below what your favorite thing about the One Piece card game is. I know for me it's definitely the community. I've made so many new friends and seen so many new faces, just interacted with an amazing group of people, and just the community in general has just been very welcoming, which is something I haven't really experienced in a lot of card games before, so it's a really nice refreshing take. But also, you're entering this giveaway, you must know what it is. So we have 1 structure deck of Absolute Justice. This is an extra that I had, so I thought I'd tack it on to this today's giveaway. But also, we have this alt art Leader Smoker. So this is a card that I've been kind of trying to trade away, but it hasn't quite found its home yet. I decided maybe it's time to just give this away. This is also kind of a special card to me because this actually came from a pack that I won off of a locals tournament that I won with this exact list. So, I mean, I think it all just fits in together. So if you end up winning the giveaway, you will get 1 structure deck of ST6, I think this is, and 1 alt art Leader Smoker. So good luck to everyone, and remember, the only 2 requirements are that you're subbed to the channel and that you have the comment down below. But with that out of the way, let's get right into the video and look at this new Dofi list that I've been playing. So we're gonna of course start off with our leader, Doflamingo. This leader is really good into this meta because it allows you to attack aggressively while also developing something on board. His leader skill is just when he's attacking, if he has 2 Dawn under him, you could rest an additional Dawn and then reveal the top card of your deck. And if that card is a 7 Warlords of the Sea card with a cost of 4 or less, then you're going to summon it rested. What this allows you to do is you could swing really aggressively with 7k or even control the board, right? Because most of the really good cards in the game right now are like, you know, sitting at around 5k, stuff like Okiku, you know, even like Kuzan and everything like that. So being at that 7k swing allows you to control the board or be very aggressive while also developing something onto the board, which is something no other leader really does right now. And it just gets you an insane amount of value in the early and mid game. And because of that, we run a bunch of 4-cost like 7 Warlords of the Sea cards. You know, we run Perona to restructure our deck. But with that being said, let's get right into what other cards we run, starting off with the 1 costs. So of course, I think this is no surprise to anyone when we run 4 Perona. I just got these box top Peronas, they look really nice, but her on-play effect is just look at the top 5 cards of your deck and then rearrange them in any order. This is not only going to help you with the consistency through your deck because you could kind of plan ahead and plan out your turns. You know, if you see like a 9-cost Mihawk on the top of your deck when it's like turn 2 or 3, you know you're not going to be able to use it. You might want to just, you know, put that at the bottom of your stack so it's the 5th card that you draw. But also, more importantly, it's going to help you throughout your early and mid game to get that Doflamingo leader skill off. Because the Doflamingo leader skill relies on you revealing that top card, knowing it with Perona is actually very important, and it's going to allow you to kind of shape your turns around when you want to use the leader skill and when you don't. But Perona just makes it all happen in the early game. This is the main card that I want to see in my first turns because she just opens up so many plays. And then in the late game, she's pretty And she's relevant throughout the whole game because, you know, I might be fishing and digging for a card in the late game that I really need. So she's going to just like bring that to the top of the deck. She's also a 1k counter, so she's never really going to be useless in your hand. And on top of that, you could also bottom deck the cards that you look at the top of your stack. So oftentimes into green, especially if they have like something like an 8-cost kid, your Doflamingo leader skill is actually less important in the game. And what's really important is landing those 9-cost Mihawks. So a lot of the time, if I don't see the 9-cost in my top stack, I'm just bottom decking the whole stack and really looking for those 9 costs. But I don't think I need to dwell on this for too long. She's amazing for consistency, and even more so because of that Doflamingo leader effect. Moving on to our additional 1 costs, I run 2 of the new Doflamingo from OP2. This card is really great because it acts kind of like a second Perona, so that you are essentially running like 5 copies of Perona. This one is just on play. Look at the top 3 cards of your deck, so it's a little bit worse because you're seeing less cards, but honestly in the first turns, like the likelihood of you not hitting a 7 Warlords of the Sea is really low since you run so many. He also has the added effect of when he has a Dawn under him and he attacks, you could bottom deck one of your opponent's cards that cost 1 or less. This is going to be so important because Zoro is so prevalent in the meta right now, and attaching 1 Dawn to him is actually not too bad into Zoro because you're able to swing at something like a Sunnykun or a Curly to Dawn, and then you're able to bottom deck something else, which is really, really important for staving off aggression in the early game. This is also kind of going to help you into Kinemon and even Law, because Law's not going to expect you to bottom deck their Namis. They're not really used to having their Namis removed in any sort of way, so Doflamingo could actually be like a high priority target and eat stuff like Vistas early on. But other than that, you know, I don't run too many of him. I only run the 2 because he doesn't have any counter, and outside of, you know, those effects, he's kind of just a worse Perona because he doesn't look at as many cards and he's less useful in the late game. And then finally, topping off our 1 costs, I only run the 2 Law. This card used to be at 4 in my deck, but honestly, I cut it down to 3, and then now I'm sitting at 2, which I actually really enjoy. This card is a little bit more difficult to run nowadays because of how much removal we have in the game. Between Vistas, you know, Seaquakes, and of course, 9-cost Whitebeard is just running rampant in both Strawbeard and Zoro. This card usually never sticks, and I would rather have another card in its place. And I don't know about how this plays out in your games, but in mine, a lot of the time in the mid and late game when I have this card out, sometimes I will want to just, you know, like play over it if he's still on the board for something, you know, like a Kuma or like a Boa, just so that I can have like a higher cost and also a higher power blocker on the field so that it has less of a chance to get popped, right? Because in those late game scenarios, it's really important that you have blockers that are above 1000 because they could just be easily removed and then you could get swung out for game, right? But there are still scenarios that I really like using him in. For example, he's an awesome thing to pair with 9-cost Mihawk. Adding that 1 extra Law blocker is actually really important because it allows you to be just a little bit more defensive in otherwise like a really open turn. He's also really good if you're going second, because imagine you played like a Perona or a Dofi and stacked your deck. On your second turn, you're gonna have 4 Dawn, which means that you're gonna use 3 Dawn to attach 2 and then rest 1 for the Doflamingo effect. And then you could actually protect whatever comes out rested with this Trafalgar Law by resting 1 Dawn. So it's a really strong play to do in the early game, which is why I keep him around. But other than those scenarios, you know, he's oftentimes getting rested or popped, or some other horrible things are happening to him. So I cut him down to 2, and I've been really enjoying it. And then moving on to the only 2-cost character that I run, and it's just the 4 Alvita. Not a lot to say about this card. Mainly it's for the 2k counter, but you could also use that when attacking effect into, you know, things like Zoro if needed. It doesn't come up that much because you also have to trash a card, and then there's just not a lot of cards that you would rather bounce. It's even weaker in this format, you know, against things like Kinemon, because if they play something like an Okiku, because they could just follow up an Okiku with something like a Yamato and then rest this and attack into it. So I usually am not found playing this, but it is still a good 2k counter to run that has like very niche scenarios in regards to being played. And then moving on to the only 3 costs that I run, it is of course the blocker Doflamingo. He's gonna act exactly like Perona does. Look at the top 5 cards of your deck, rearrange them in any order, but this time he's a blocker, which is really good in any stage of the game, honestly. And because he's at this 4,000 power, he's actually really important because he can't be Vista'd without something like an Otama, he can't be Whitebeard without something like an Otama. Sometimes he'll even eat Jet Pistols, which is really amazing. That's awesome value for you. And most importantly, he's like one of the best cards to get back from the Gekkomoria 4 cost. And he's just amazing. He's a great card. He's great into Zoro for just swinging into the chump blockers. And then they usually won't swing at him because they don't want to, you know, like swing at your board after you've attacked with this thing. So he will usually stick, and then you could use him as a blocker in whatever turn you want. So he's just a really great all-around card. So now we are moving on to all of the Warlords that we run in this deck. Of course, like I'm pretty sure half or more than half of the deck is just Warlord cards. Starting off with the 6,000 power Gekkomoria. With more Whitebeard running around in this meta, this is such an amazing card because if you go first against Whitebeard, this is a really strong play because most Whitebeard players will want to go second. So what ends up happening is on your first turn, you could stack something like a Perona, and then hopefully you get this Gekkomoria at the top of your stack. And then you can make it so that on your turn 2, you send out this Gekkomoria and then attack the Whitebeard player for 7k. What this does is it makes them have to counter out of a 7,000 attack unless they want to eat it, which will get rid of a 2k. But also, this is a very threatening thing on the board because it is 6k alone, which means I could attack with it next turn without investing any Dawn. Also, he's probably not going to be able to swing into this because ideally he'll have a 4 cost to play. So on his turn, he'll play that 4 cost, swing into the Gekkomoria with 6,000 power, and then you could just counter out with, you know, like a 1k or a 2k, pretty much anything, and you'll have this attacker out for free. So this card is really good. I would maybe consider bumping it down to 3, but honestly at 4, it's just fine for me. It's usually my go-to 1k counter if I ever need to. But other than that, he's just an amazing card to see on your stack. And then, of course, we have the 4 Dracula Mihawk. Mainly, he's a 2k counter. Sometimes I do end up playing him, especially if he's like the only Warlord on my stack. I try to avoid playing him, though, because I really want him just for the 2k counters, especially with how aggressive this format is with, you know, all the Zoro players. Whitebeard, he's especially great into because he'll usually swing at you 6k. He's a 2k counter. He's something that could be summoned. He's just an amazing all-around card for this deck. And then moving on to probably the most important, if not one of the most important Warlords, we have Gekkomoria. He is just great. He's a 4 cost 5k with 1k counter. And then, so what this means is you're grabbing any Warlord that you can from your discard pile. Also, you could potentially grab Perona if you need something, you know, more to stack. But mainly, I'm gonna grab back something like a Mihawk for a 2k counter, or I really like recycling those 3 cost Doflamingos, especially into Zoro, because it's really easy to just get into like this flow state of, you know, getting this Gekkomoria off the top, grabbing back a Doflamingo, playing it, and then grabbing a new stack. It's just an amazing cycle to be in because you just completely recycle everything on your board. He's a great card in to pretty much any stage of the game because your discard pile basically becomes like a second huge hand that you could kind of fish out of, and he's probably the best card to get off of your leader skill because you're swinging 7k and basically going +1 because you're adding a card to your hand for free. So I wouldn't run this card at anything lower than 4. It would just be honestly crazy to me. He also has 1k counter, but it's not that relevant. I usually never throw him away. So of course we are running, and then of course in any Dofi deck, I love running these cards. It is 4 of the Bartholomew Kuma, and then I also run 4 of the Pacifista. So for those of you that don't know, Bartholomew Kuma's effect is on KO, you get to summon a Pacifista from your hand, and he's also a blocker. So he is able to be very defensive, and then also you could be very offensive with the Pacifista. I find him to be really great in this meta because he's great at like the mid to late game where you're kind of in crunch time. I especially love playing him into Kinemon because you could do a lot of mind games with their Odin. When the 8-cost Odin drops down, you kind of have to maneuver around it with all of your blockers, and Kuma's one of the best blockers to do that with because what you could do is if they don't rest him, you know, you're always going to be threatening this Pacifista. And oftentimes, like, since Kinemons don't run the 8-cost kit anymore, they will be at a very low life since you're swinging at them like every single turn. So in the later stages of the game, and in the later stages of the game where you have like your love beams, multiple blockers out, this is a really scary card because this acts as like a blocker, and then on the crackback turn, you now have like a 6k attacker that you can use to kind of close out the game. And then we are also running only 3 of the Boa Hancock. I cut this card down to 3 because the deck list is honestly just like really tight, and Boa was the card that was giving me the least amount of value in it. She rarely sticks on the board because, you know, she's usually gonna eat a jet pistol or just get swung at. I usually try to protect her as much as I can because of her effect. Her effect is when she has a Dawn under her, whether she's attacking or blocking, because she's a blocker, you're gonna draw 1 card if you have 5 or less in your hand. And this is really important in the mid to late game, especially in very simplified board states. Like, you just drop this card and she's able to like recoup your value throughout the game. She's also one of the best cards to play into red because then you could counter aggressively without having to worry. Probably gonna be countering pretty early, you know, getting that hand size low. So playing this Boa Hancock could potentially be huge. Being able to recoup your hand and get more card advantage against Zoro is honestly amazing. She's pretty much good into every matchup. It's just that with all of the destruction effects, she's a high priority target for them. So most of the time you're not going to get the value off of her, but that still doesn't mean that she's not worth running, right? So I run 3 of her in this deck. I haven't wanted to cut her or, you know, raise her. I think she's perfect at 3. And then lastly, I run 2 Marshall D Teach. You guys might be asking, you know, where are the Treasure Cup Jinbeis? I don't have them. I'm broke, all right? But all jokes aside, I actually think Teach is still pretty good to run in this format. I see a lot of people completely switching him out for the Jinbeis, but I just don't think that's really a viable thing to do. I think you need to run at least like 2 or 3 of this Teach because sometimes your opponent will have something on the board that you need to get rid of right away, like an Okiku or a Robin. Also, on top of that, a lot of people will just play around the Jinbei. A lot of decks actually can afford to play around the Jinbei. I think the only one is kind of Zoro, but you know, they're not going to be swinging into your board anyway unless they're dying, and if they're dying, you know, that on KO effect to bottom deck something really doesn't matter all too much. But yeah, in general, I think the Teach is still viable. I haven't played with the Jinbeis yet. I only have 1, so maybe I'll start testing with it. But yeah, I just think Teach is a great card. And then of course, rounding out our characters, I run 4 of the 9-cost Mihawk. I don't run the 6-cost Mihawk, and I also don't run 7-cost Dofi because I feel like you should pretty much be trying to always use your leader skill up until the late game, where you could just like chain these Mihawks together. I would be open to playing the 6-cost Mihawk just because, you know, on the off chance someone does play 8-cost Kid, he's going to be really good into that. But in general, like, I really just want to chain these Mihawks together in most of my matchups. But in general, I just want to like Mihawk turn after turn into things like Green and Trafalgar Law. The only matchup he's really not useful in is the Zoro matchup and sometimes the Whitebeard matchup because you might be dying too fast. But even then, like, this Mihawk is really great for removing, you know, things like Ace, things like 5-cost Luffy. He's just an amazing card that you can't slip up on. And also into Kinemon, he's just gotten even stronger because a lot of the Kinemons are running 2, even 3 7-drop Kid, so it makes it a dead card in their hand, or if they play it, they'll just lose an entire turn. So it's way too risky to do. This 9-cost Mihawk is honestly one of the best cards in your deck and pretty much your endgame board state. And then moving on to the last cards and the events, we have 4 Love Beam. I run 4 because, you know, in those, I love having these in my hand or having the option to play them in the late game. Usually I will either keep these in my hand or push these down to the bottom of my stack so I could chain them together, especially into very like tight and simplified board states. It could actually catch your opponent off guard by a lot. I've done this so many times where like I'll see like 1 or 2 love beams in my stack, and then I'll only have like 2 cards in hand, maybe even 1 card in hand, and I'll leave like 6 Dawn open. So my opponent thinks I'm like bluffing Dawn, but I'm not. I actually have love beams like over and over again, and they're just not expecting it. So I'll block multiple of their attacks. They'll be fully tapped out, and then on the crackback turn, like, I'm able to just win the game. I actually win a lot of Kinemon games just because of this love beam. I think every Kinemon I've played against at locals, I've won against. This card is especially good into Kinemon because a lot of the time they'll just lazily swing with you at 8 with the Odin, and then these love beams are just super important for protecting your board so that you could kill him next turn, or even protecting your life so that you can just like live another turn. And then for my last and final card, I run 1 Arabesque Brickfist. This card is really clutch in the times that I've drawn into it. It's mainly for things like 4-cost Marco and, you know, Borsellino for black, because most of the time they will just not expect you to play this card. This card has become really clutch in the late game because they're not really expecting you to have a removal this cheap. So a lot of the times, like, I'll be against like a smoker player and they'll only bunker up with like 1 Borsellino because they think that I don't have a way to remove it, because the only other way for me to remove something like that would be with like a 9-cost Mihawk, you know, a Sables, or like a 7-cost Dofi. But resting 2 Dawn and just giving back their Borsellino so that you can like full stack and swing is actually one of the plays that I have really stuck with. And for people still running Boatbeard, especially for the Marcos, this is really good. And even for just regular Whitebeard, this is an amazing card to play because it gives you a turn 5 play to respond to their 4-cost. Most of the time, you know, like my turn 5 is a little bit awkward because I still want to use my leader skill, but now I have this like 2 hanging Dawn that I could use for something like a love beam, maybe something else. But Brickfist actually fully, you know, curves me out because I'll attack them for 7k on that turn, and then if they played a 4-cost on their turn 2, on my turn 3 I'll have 5 Dawn up, 2 for the Brickfist, 3 for the leader skill, and then that puts them behind by so much. But what do you guys think about this list? I think right now, since OP2 has started, I'm like 8-1 with it. I think I've only lost once with this deck since I've been playing it in OP2, and that was mainly to the 8-cost kid, and it was also playing against Alan, who's objectively one of the best players in the game right now. You know, he top 5 at regional, so I don't feel too bad about that. But other than that, I feel really good about this deck, and if 8-cost kid just stays out of the meta, I think this could really be a viable strategy to run in like the bigger tournaments like Treasure Cup or regionals. But let me know what you guys think.